My name is Cassandra Williams, and I'm 24 years old. Standing here in the pouring rain outside my family's Connecticut mansion, my wedding dress completely soaked, clutching a crumpled $10 bill that my father just threw in my face. 3 hours ago, I thought I was finally ready to introduce my husband Derek to my parents. Instead, they discovered my secret marriage to a mechanic and lost their minds. My mother screamed that I was an ungrateful disappointment who destroyed our family reputation. Now security guards are walking toward me with orders to physically remove me from the property where I grew up. Before we dive into this incredible journey of betrayal, survival, and ultimate triumph, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, smash that like button if you're ready for a story that will completely blow your mind, and don't forget to subscribe because what happens next will shock you to your core. Trust me, you won't believe how this family drama unfolds and the sweet justice that comes 5 years later. For 20 years of my life, I had been carefully molded into what my parents considered the perfect socialite daughter. My father, Richard Williams, owned Williams and Associates, one of Connecticut's most prestigious investment firms, built on generations of inherited wealth that traced back to railroad money from the 1800s. Our family name opened doors that most people didn't even know existed, and with that privilege came suffocating expectations that I was expected to fulfill without question. My mother, Catherine Williams, was a former debutante who had dedicated her entire existence to maintaining our family's position in high society. Every morning, she would review the social pages of various newspapers, tracking which families were rising or falling in status, making mental notes about who deserved our attention and who should be quietly dropped from our social circle. She treated reputation management like a full-time career, orchestrating charity galas, country club events, and dinner parties with the precision of a military general planning a campaign. From childhood, every aspect of my life was controlled and monitored. I attended exclusive private schools where the tuition cost more than most people's annual salaries. My weekends were filled with piano lessons, horseback riding, tennis instruction, and etiquette classes designed to transform me into the kind of woman who could seamlessly navigate wealthy social circles. During summers, I was shipped off to expensive camps in the Hamptons where I learned to sail, play polo, and make connections with other privileged children who would become my future network. But beneath this carefully constructed facade, I harbored dreams and desires that my parents would have considered absolutely scandalous. 2 years ago, while taking a community college auto mechanics class that I had enrolled in secretly, I met Derek Rodriguez, a 26-year-old mechanic who owned a small garage on the other side of town. He was everything my parents despised: working class, Hispanic, and completely uninterested in the shallow pursuits that defined my family's world. Derek possessed a genuine warmth and authenticity that was completely foreign to the artificial environment I had grown up in. When he smiled, it reached his eyes in a way that the practiced expressions of my social circle never did. He worked with his hands, creating something useful and necessary, while the men in my world shuffled money around and called it productivity. Most importantly, he saw me as Cassie, not as an extension of the Williams family brand. Our relationship developed slowly and carefully, conducted entirely in secret. I would tell my parents I was attending charity committee meetings or shopping excursions, then sneak away to spend time with Derek at his garage or in quiet restaurants far from anywhere my family might frequent. For the first time in my life, I experienced what it felt like to be valued for who I truly was rather than what I represented. Meanwhile, my parents had already mapped out my future with military precision. I was expected to marry Hampton Blackwell III, the son of another wealthy Connecticut banking family. Hampton was exactly what my parents considered an ideal match: impeccably educated, socially prominent, and completely boring. He treated our arranged courtship like a business transaction, which I suppose it essentially was. Our conversations revolved around stock portfolios, real estate investments, and which country clubs had the most exclusive membership policies. 3 days before that fateful confrontation, Derek and I had made the decision to elope. We drove to a small courthouse in Vermont and exchanged vows in a simple ceremony that cost less than one of my mother's weekly flower arrangements. I wore a modest white dress that I had purchased with my own money, and Derek looked incredibly handsome in the only suit he owned. It was the most authentic and beautiful day of my life, and I naively believed that I could gradually introduce Derek to my family and somehow make them understand that true love was more valuable than social status. My plan was to ease them into the idea slowly, perhaps inviting Derek to a casual family dinner and allowing them to see his genuine character before revealing the depth of our relationship. I had prepared speeches explaining how Derek made me happy, how he supported my goals and dreams, and how love should transcend superficial considerations like social class or family background. I genuinely believed that my parents, despite their flaws, loved me enough to want my happiness above all else. That illusion was shattered completely when Hampton's mother, Virginia Blackwell, spotted our wedding photos on social media. I had posted them with privacy settings, but apparently not carefully enough. Within an hour of Virginia's discovery, my phone was ringing with my mother's hysterical voice demanding that I come home immediately. The tone in her voice told me that my secret was out, but I still hoped that we could have a rational conversation about my choices and my future. The confrontation that followed was more vicious and cruel than anything I could have imagined. When I arrived at our family mansion, still wearing my wedding dress because I had wanted them to see me as a bride, as their daughter who had found love and happiness, I was greeted by two parents who looked at me as if I were a complete stranger who had somehow infiltrated their home. My father was pacing back and forth in his study, his face red with rage, holding printouts of our wedding photos that Virginia Blackwell had apparently emailed to him. The veins in his neck were bulging, and I had never seen him so completely consumed with anger. When he finally spoke, his voice was cold and controlled in a way that was somehow more terrifying than shouting would have been. "You have exactly one choice to make right now, Cassandra," he said, emphasizing my full name in a way that made it sound like a curse. "You can choose him, this nobody garage worker who will never amount to anything, or you can choose your family, your heritage, and the life that we have sacrificed everything to provide for you. But you absolutely cannot have both. If you walk out of this house as his wife, you are no longer our daughter." My mother's reaction was even more devastating because it was so deeply personal. She looked at me with a mixture of disgust and disappointment that cut straight through my heart. I spent 24 years raising what I thought was my daughter, but apparently I was wrong. I raised a slut who spreads her legs for working-class nobody and throws away everything we built for this family. You have disgraced us, humiliated us, and destroyed years of careful relationship building with the Blackwell family. When I tried to explain that Derek was a good man, that he treated me with respect and kindness, that he supported my dreams and made me genuinely happy, they refused to listen. My father interrupted every attempt at explanation with increasingly harsh accusations. He claimed that Derek had obviously seduced me for my money, that he was probably involved with drugs or crime, that I had been brainwashed by some kind of working-class fantasy that bore no resemblance to reality. The financial threats came next, delivered with brutal efficiency. My father informed me that all of my credit cards had already been cancelled, that my trust fund had been frozen indefinitely, and that they would no longer pay for my college tuition or any other expenses. He explained this as if he were discussing a business transaction, completely devoid of any parental emotion or concern for my well-being. Then came the moment that I will never forget as long as I live. My father reached into his wallet, pulled out a crumpled $10 bill, and literally threw it at my face. The money hit my cheek and fluttered to the floor while he said, "This is all you're worth now. This is what you've chosen over everything we've given you, everything we've built, everything we represent. Take your $10 and your precious mechanic and see how far that gets you in the real world." My mother added her own final insult, informing me that she was immediately calling security to have me physically removed from the property. She explained that I was no longer welcome in their home, that I should not attempt to contact them or any of our family friends, and that she would be spreading the word throughout our social circle that I had suffered some kind of mental breakdown that required them to cut off all contact for everyone's protection. Within minutes, 2 security guards appeared at the study door. These were men who had known me since childhood, who had smiled and waved when I came home from school, who had helped carry my luggage when I returned from college breaks. Now they looked uncomfortable but determined as they informed me that I needed to leave the property immediately. I was escorted out of my childhood home wearing my wedding dress, carrying nothing but my purse and my cell phone, while my parents watched from the front window with expressions of cold satisfaction. The security guards were professional but firm, making it clear that I was not welcome to return and collect any of my belongings. Everything I had ever owned, every photograph, every piece of clothing, every book or memento from my childhood, remained behind those doors that were now permanently closed to me. Derek arrived 20 minutes later in his old pickup truck, having received my desperate phone call from the end of our long driveway. He found me sitting on the curb in my soaked wedding dress, shivering from cold and shock, clutching that crumpled $10 bill that had become a symbol of my parents' complete rejection. He didn't say a word, just wrapped his jacket around my shoulders and helped me into his truck, while my parents watched from their mansion window as their daughter drove away with the man they despised. That night, I slept in Derek's tiny studio apartment above his garage, lying on his narrow bed while he took the couch, both of us trying to process what had just happened. The space was smaller than my childhood walk-in closet, but it felt like a sanctuary compared to the cold cruelty I had just experienced. Derek held me while I cried, promising that we would figure everything out together, that love was stronger than money or social status, that we could build a life based on genuine values rather than inherited privilege. The next morning brought the harsh reality of what my new life would actually look like. I woke up in Derek's tiny apartment with absolutely no money, no practical work experience, and no education beyond the liberal arts degree that my parents had encouraged because it was considered appropriately feminine and non-threatening. My entire identity had been built around being Richard and Cassandra Williams' daughter, and without that foundation, I felt completely lost and unprepared for basic survival. My first attempts at finding employment were humiliating disasters that revealed just how sheltered and impractical my upbringing had been. When I applied for retail positions at clothing stores, managers looked at my resume with confusion and skepticism. They couldn't understand why someone with my educational background and family connections would want to work in their shops, and they suspected that I was either lying about my qualifications or that I would quit as soon as something better came along. The few interviews I managed to secure went poorly because I had no experience with the practical aspects of working for a living. I didn't know how to operate cash registers, I had never handled customer service complaints, and I couldn't relate to the financial pressures that motivated most workers. My attempts to explain my situation sounded like elaborate fiction, and most potential employers concluded that I was either delusional or manipulative. After 2 weeks of rejections, I finally found work with a commercial cleaning company that operated during night shifts in downtown office buildings. The job paid minimum wage and required me to arrive at 10 p.m. and work until 6 a.m., scrubbing toilets, emptying trash cans, and mopping floors in the same type of corporate buildings where my father conducted his business meetings. The irony was not lost on me that I was now cleaning the offices of people who might have been clients or colleagues of my family. The physical demands of the work were unlike anything I had ever experienced. My hands, which had never done anything more strenuous than tennis or piano playing, became raw and cracked from industrial cleaning chemicals. My back ached from bending and lifting, and my feet developed blisters from standing on hard floors for 8 hours straight. But more challenging than the physical discomfort was the psychological adjustment to being completely invisible to the professional class that I had once belonged to. Derek was incredibly supportive during this difficult transition, but he was also struggling with his own financial pressures. His small garage was barely breaking even, and he began working double shifts to support both of us. He would wake up at 6 a.m. to open his shop, work on cars all day, then pick up evening shifts at a larger automotive center across town. By the time he came home, we were both exhausted and stressed, struggling to maintain our relationship while dealing with practical survival challenges. The situation became even more complicated when Derek's father suffered a massive heart attack and required emergency surgery. The medical bills were overwhelming, and Derek felt obligated to help his family cover expenses that their insurance wouldn't pay. This meant that our already tight budget became even more strained, and I felt guilty about being an additional financial burden when his family needed help. Meanwhile, my parents were actively working to ensure that I remained isolated from any potential sources of support. They contacted all of our family friends and acquaintances, explaining that I had suffered a mental breakdown and that any contact with me would be harmful to my recovery. They portrayed themselves as devastated parents who were protecting their daughter's privacy while she received professional help for her psychological problems. This campaign was remarkably effective because it played into existing prejudices about mental health and class differences. Our social circle found it easier to believe that I had experienced some kind of psychological crisis rather than accepting that I had genuinely chosen love over money. The story also allowed them to maintain their comfortable assumptions about class boundaries and the natural order of social hierarchies. Despite these overwhelming challenges, I was determined to prove that I could succeed on my own terms. I enrolled in night business classes at the community college, using financial aid to cover tuition costs. The courses were scheduled around my cleaning job, which meant that I was attending classes during the day after working all night. The schedule was exhausting, but I was motivated by a growing desire to understand how business and finance actually worked rather than simply inheriting wealth and status. My first semester was particularly difficult because I was competing with students who had been working and studying while managing family responsibilities for years. They possessed practical knowledge and life experience that I completely lacked, and initially I felt intimidated and out of place. However, I gradually discovered that my privileged background had given me certain advantages, particularly in written communication and analytical thinking, that helped me excel in academic work. After 6 months of proving my reliability and work ethic, I was promoted to cleaning supervisor, which came with a small raise and additional responsibilities. The promotion meant that I was managing other workers and coordinating cleaning schedules for multiple buildings. This experience taught me valuable lessons about leadership, time management, and working with people from diverse backgrounds that I never would have learned in my privileged bubble. Derek noticed the changes in my competence and capabilities, and he began asking for my help with the business side of his garage operation. He was an excellent mechanic with a loyal customer base, but he struggled with bookkeeping, marketing, and financial planning. I started helping him organize his records, track expenses, and develop systems for managing customer relationships more effectively. Working together on Derek's business gave me practical experience with accounting, customer service, and small business operations that complemented my academic studies perfectly. I discovered that I had a natural aptitude for financial analysis and strategic planning, skills that had been dormant during my years of social butterfly training but were now being developed through necessity and genuine interest. 8 months after my expulsion from the family, I received an unexpected phone call from my younger sister Emma, who had maintained complete silence since the wedding dress confrontation. Emma was 21 years old, still living at home while finishing her senior year at an expensive private college, and I had assumed that she was following our parents' orders to avoid any contact with me. Emma suggested that we meet secretly at a small diner outside of town, claiming that she had important information about our parents' attitude toward my situation. When I arrived, she looked nervous and guilty, constantly checking her phone and glancing around as if she expected to be discovered. She explained that our parents had been monitoring her communications and social media accounts to ensure that she wasn't secretly maintaining contact with me. According to Emma, our parents had been gradually softening their position over the past several months. She claimed that they were beginning to realize that their reaction had been too extreme, that they missed me, and that they might be willing to consider some kind of reconciliation if I was willing to take the first step. She painted a picture of our father working late into the night, looking sad and distracted, and our mother occasionally crying while looking at old family photographs. Emma's story seemed plausible because I desperately wanted it to be true. Despite everything my parents had done, I still loved them and missed the security and warmth that I associated with family relationships. The holidays were approaching, and the thought of spending Christmas completely alone while my family celebrated without me was incredibly painful. I had been hoping for some sign that reconciliation might be possible, and Emma's phone call seemed like answered prayers. She suggested that I attend our family's annual Christmas party, which was always held at our house for close friends and extended family members. Emma argued that this would provide the perfect opportunity for a natural, low-pressure reunion that wouldn't require anyone to admit fault or apologize publicly. She convinced me that my parents were too proud to reach out directly, but that they would be grateful and relieved if I took the initiative to rebuild our relationship. I spent weeks agonizing over this decision, discussing it endlessly with Derek, who was understandably skeptical about my family's motives. He reminded me of the cruel things they had said and done, and he worried that I was setting myself up for additional hurt and disappointment. However, he also understood my need to explore any possibility of reconciliation, and he supported my decision while making me promise to protect myself emotionally. On the night of the Christmas party, I dressed carefully in a modest but elegant outfit that I had purchased with my cleaning job wages. I wanted to look successful and happy, to show my parents that I had thrived despite their rejection, while also demonstrating that I respected the formality of their social gathering. I arrived at the familiar mansion with my heart pounding, uncertain of what kind of reception I would receive. Initially, everything seemed to go exactly as Emma had predicted. My parents greeted me with stiff but polite acknowledgement, and other party guests seemed pleased to see me after months of absence. Several family friends commented on how well I looked, and my father even made a few civil comments about my apparent independence and maturity. For about an hour, I began to believe that reconciliation was actually possible. Then my father called for everyone's attention and began what I initially thought would be a standard holiday toast. Instead, he launched into a carefully prepared speech about how families sometimes face challenges that test their bonds, and how important it is to forgive temporary lapses in judgment while welcoming loved ones back into the fold. He explained that I had gone through a period of temporary insanity, experimenting with inappropriate relationships and lifestyle choices, but that I had now learned my lesson and was ready to return to my proper place in the family. The speech was a masterpiece of manipulation and public humiliation disguised as forgiveness and welcome. My father announced that my brief marriage to Derek had been annulled, that I had realized my mistake, and that I was now prepared to move forward with my engagement to Hampton Blackwell III as originally planned. He presented this as my own decision, claiming that I had asked him to make this announcement because I was too embarrassed about my previous poor judgment to speak publicly about my return to sanity. I was completely stunned by this performance, realizing that my parents had orchestrated this entire scenario to publicly humiliate me while appearing generous and forgiving. They had used Emma to lure me into a trap where I would be forced to either comply with their fiction or cause a scene that would make me look ungrateful and unstable. The assembled guests were looking at me expectantly, waiting for me to express gratitude for my family's forgiveness and confirm my father's version of events. Instead, I stood up and told the truth. I explained that I was happily married to Derek Rodriguez, that I had never been more fulfilled and confident in my life, and that I would not be returning to the superficial existence that my parents had designed for me. I spoke about the genuine love and respect that Derek showed me, contrasting it with the conditional approval and controlling behavior that characterized my relationship with my family. The reaction was swift and devastating. My father's face turned purple with rage, and my mother began sobbing dramatically about my continued mental illness and ingratitude. The party guests looked shocked and uncomfortable, uncertain about how to respond to this family drama that was playing out in front of them. Several people began quietly gathering their coats and making excuses to leave early. But the real betrayal was yet to come. 2 days later, Derek was arrested at his garage on charges of theft related to automotive parts and equipment. The police claimed they had received a tip about stolen merchandise being sold through his business, and they had a warrant to search his property and financial records. Derek was completely bewildered by these accusations because he ran his business honestly and kept meticulous records of all his transactions. It quickly became clear that my parents had orchestrated this arrest as retaliation for my public defiance at their party. They had used their connections and influence to fabricate evidence against Derek, counting on the fact that law enforcement would be more likely to believe wealthy, prominent citizens than a working-class mechanic with limited resources for legal defense. The final twist was discovering that Emma had been working with our parents throughout our secret meetings. She had been recording our conversations on her phone, gathering information about Derek's business practices and daily routines that could be used to build a case against him. Her tears and expressions of concern for my welfare had been completely fake, part of an elaborate plan to gather intelligence and lure me into the Christmas party trap. Emma later admitted that our parents had threatened to cut off her college tuition and trust fund if she refused to cooperate in their scheme. She claimed that she had tried to warn me subtly during our meetings, but I had been too eager for reconciliation to pick up on her hints. While I could understand her fear of losing her financial security, I felt completely betrayed by her willingness to participate in destroying my marriage and Derek's livelihood to protect her own interests. Derek's arrest shattered any remaining illusions I had about my parents' capacity for cruelty or their willingness to destroy innocent people to maintain control over my life. Watching the man I loved being handcuffed and led away in front of his customers and neighbors was the moment I fully understood that this conflict was not about family disagreement or generational differences, but about power, control, and the lengths that wealthy people would go to protect their perceived interests. The charges against Derek were serious enough to potentially result in several years in prison if he was convicted. The prosecution claimed that he had been running a sophisticated operation involving stolen automotive parts, falsified invoices, and money laundering through his small business. The evidence appeared substantial at first glance, including documentation that seemed to show suspicious financial transactions and testimony from witnesses who claimed to have seen Derek handling stolen merchandise. However, as I began investigating these allegations more carefully, I started noticing inconsistencies and impossibilities in the prosecution's case. My business classes had taught me how to read financial statements and track money flows, and I could see that the supposedly incriminating transactions actually represented legitimate business expenses and income. The dates and amounts didn't align with Derek's actual business practices, and several of the alleged witnesses had connections to my family's social and business network. Using all of our savings and borrowing additional money from Derek's family, we hired the best criminal defense attorney we could afford. Jennifer Patterson was a former prosecutor who had left the district attorney's office after becoming disillusioned with the political influences that affected high-profile cases. She immediately recognized that Derek's case had the hallmarks of a frame-up job, and she was outraged by the obvious abuse of the legal system for personal revenge. Jennifer taught me how to conduct legal research and investigate evidence, skills that complemented my developing expertise in financial analysis and business operations. Together, we spent countless hours reviewing police reports, interviewing witnesses, and tracking down the sources of the allegedly stolen merchandise. The work was tedious and technical, but I was motivated by love for Derek and growing anger about the injustice of his situation. Meanwhile, Derek spent 3 months in county jail awaiting trial because we couldn't afford the excessive bail that had been set by a judge who was apparently influenced by behind-the-scenes pressure from powerful community members. Visiting him in jail twice a week was heartbreaking, but it also strengthened my resolve to fight back against my family's attempt to destroy our lives. Derek remained optimistic and supportive despite his circumstances, encouraging me to use this crisis as an opportunity to develop my capabilities and discover my own strength. During this period, I received an unexpected phone call from Hampton Blackwell III, the man my parents had intended for me to marry. Hampton explained that he had been uncomfortable with the arranged engagement from the beginning, that he had never been interested in marrying someone who didn't want to be with him, and that he was appalled by my parents' treatment of me and Derek. He offered to help in any way he could, including providing financial support for Derek's legal defense. More importantly, Hampton had insider knowledge about my family's business operations and social connections that proved invaluable in understanding how they had orchestrated Derek's frame-up. He revealed that my father had been bragging to other wealthy community members about teaching me a lesson and demonstrating what happened to people who defied established social hierarchies. These conversations had been overheard by Hampton and others who were disturbed by the vindictive nature of my parents' campaign. Hampton also provided crucial information about the financial relationships between my family's investment firm and several local businesses, including automotive parts suppliers who had been pressured to provide false testimony against Derek. These business connections explained how my parents had been able to fabricate evidence and convince witnesses to lie about Derek's alleged criminal activities. The breakthrough in Derek's case came when Jennifer Patterson discovered that the supposedly stolen merchandise had actually been purchased legitimately by Derek's business, but that the invoices had been altered after the fact to make the transactions appear suspicious. The original documentation still existed in the supplier's files, and when we compared it to the evidence being used by the prosecution, the alterations were obvious and undeniable. Furthermore, we discovered that the key witness against Derek had been paid by a shell company that was connected to my father's investment firm. The witness had initially refused to testify, but had changed his story after receiving a substantial consulting fee for unspecified services. When Jennifer confronted him with evidence of this payment, he admitted that he had been pressured to lie about seeing Derek with stolen merchandise. With this evidence, Jennifer was able to get the charges against Derek dropped completely. The district attorney was embarrassed by the obvious prosecutorial misconduct and the revelation that prominent community members had manipulated the legal system for personal revenge. Derek was released from jail, but the damage to his reputation and business had already been done. During the 3 months of legal battles, Derek's garage had been closed and his customer base had disappeared. Many people in our community assumed that he was guilty based on his arrest, and even after his vindication, some remained suspicious about his character and business practices. We had also exhausted our savings and gone into debt paying for legal defense, leaving us in worse financial condition than when this nightmare began. However, the experience had also revealed strengths and capabilities that neither of us had previously recognized. My combination of business education, analytical skills, and determination had proven invaluable in fighting back against my family's attack. Derek's resilience, integrity, and ability to maintain hope despite terrible circumstances had impressed everyone who worked with us, including Jennifer Patterson, who began referring other clients to us for various types of business and financial consulting. The months following Derek's vindication were a period of intense rebuilding and strategic planning that transformed both of us from victims of my family's cruelty into determined entrepreneurs with a clear vision for our future. Rather than simply trying to restore Derek's original garage business to its previous level, we decided to create something entirely new that would leverage both his mechanical expertise and my developing business acumen. Our first innovation was developing a mobile auto repair service that would bring high-quality automotive care directly to customers' homes and workplaces. This concept addressed several problems that traditional garages faced. Customers often struggled to find time to drop off and pick up their vehicles, many people felt intimidated by garage environments, and transportation issues frequently prevented people from accessing automotive services when they needed them most. Derek's deep knowledge of automotive systems, combined with his reputation for honest and reliable work among the customers who knew him personally, provided the technical foundation for our mobile service. My role involved developing business systems, managing customer relationships, handling marketing and financial operations, and creating efficient scheduling protocols that maximized our productivity while maintaining high service quality. We invested in a fully equipped service van that could handle most routine maintenance and repair work at customer locations. Derek had designed custom storage solutions that allowed us to carry a comprehensive inventory of parts and tools while maintaining organization and efficiency. The van itself became a mobile advertisement for our business, professionally painted with our company name and contact information, creating visibility and credibility wherever we went. Our marketing strategy focused on building personal relationships within our community rather than competing on price with established garages. We offered services that larger shops couldn't provide, flexible scheduling that accommodated customers' work and family responsibilities, detailed explanations of repair recommendations that helped people make informed decisions, and follow-up communication that ensured customer satisfaction and built long-term loyalty. Within 6 months, our customer base had grown large enough to require additional equipment and part-time help. We hired 2 other mechanics who shared Derek's commitment to honest dealing and quality work, and we expanded our service territory to cover a broader geographic area. Our reputation for reliability and integrity began attracting customers who were frustrated with the impersonal treatment they received from larger automotive chains. During this period, I completed my business degree while continuing to manage our company's operations. My academic work had become much more meaningful because I was applying theoretical concepts to real-world challenges every day. Courses in accounting, marketing, operations management, and strategic planning directly related to problems we were solving in our business, creating a feedback loop between education and practical experience that accelerated my learning. Derek's expertise in automotive technology led him to develop specialized knowledge about hybrid and electric vehicle systems, which were becoming increasingly common but were not well understood by many traditional mechanics. He spent his spare time studying manufacturer specifications, attending training seminars, and experimenting with diagnostic techniques that allowed us to offer services that most local garages couldn't provide. This specialization in emerging automotive technologies became a major competitive advantage as environmentally conscious consumers began seeking mechanics who understood the unique requirements of hybrid and electric vehicles. We marketed our expertise through partnerships with environmental organizations, offering educational workshops about vehicle maintenance that reduced environmental impact while building relationships with potential customers who valued sustainability. Our first major business breakthrough came when we secured a maintenance contract with a local taxi company that operated a fleet of 50 vehicles. The company had been frustrated with the downtime and scheduling difficulties associated with traditional garage services, and our mobile approach allowed them to maintain their vehicles with minimal disruption to their operations. The contract provided steady income that allowed us to invest in additional equipment and hire more employees. Word of our success with the taxi company led to additional fleet contracts with delivery services, small businesses, and government agencies that operated multiple vehicles. These contracts required us to develop sophisticated scheduling systems, inventory management protocols, and quality control procedures that transformed us from a small service business into a more complex operation with multiple revenue streams. Meanwhile, my parents and their social circle were closely monitoring our progress with a mixture of disbelief and growing concern. They had expected Derek's legal troubles to destroy any possibility of business success, and they had assumed that I would eventually become discouraged by the challenges of working-class life and return to beg for their forgiveness. Instead, our business was thriving, our reputation was growing, and I was clearly happier and more confident than I had ever been while living under their control. Derek's invention of a diagnostic tool for hybrid vehicle electrical systems represented our transition from service providers to innovators within the automotive industry. He had identified a gap in existing diagnostic equipment that made it difficult for mechanics to efficiently troubleshoot certain types of hybrid system problems. Working with an electronics engineer who was also frustrated by these limitations, Derek developed a specialized device that could quickly identify electrical issues that previously required hours of trial and error testing. The diagnostic tool was so effective that other mechanics began asking if they could purchase copies for their own use. We obtained a patent for Derek's invention and began manufacturing the devices through a partnership with a small electronics company. This represented our first step toward building a business that generated income from intellectual property rather than just labor and service. Industry recognition came when we were featured in several automotive trade magazines as examples of how small businesses could innovate and compete with larger companies by focusing on customer service and technological expertise. The articles brought us attention from potential customers throughout our region and inquiries from other entrepreneurs who wanted to license our mobile service concepts for their own markets. By the end of our second year in business, we had achieved annual revenues that exceeded what Derek had earned during his best years operating a traditional garage. More importantly, we had created a business model that was scalable and sustainable, with multiple income streams and a reputation for innovation that attracted both customers and potential partners. As our business continued to expand and gain recognition within the automotive industry, disturbing rumors began circulating about my parents' financial situation and the stability of their investment firm. The same social networks that had once protected and elevated our family were now spreading whispers about risky investment decisions, unhappy clients, and mounting debts that suggested serious problems beneath the surface of continued wealth and prominence. The economic recession that began in late 2007 had severely impacted many investment firms, but Williams and Associates appeared to be struggling more than most of their competitors. My father's strategy of pursuing high-risk, high-reward investments had worked well during periods of economic growth, but the same approach became catastrophic when markets turned volatile and unpredictable. Several major clients had withdrawn their funds after suffering substantial losses, taking their business to more conservative firms with better track records of protecting capital during difficult times. During this same period, our automotive business achieved several major milestones that demonstrated our transition from small service provider to regional industry player. We opened our second location in a neighboring city, hired 12 full-time employees, and achieved annual revenues that exceeded $1 million for the first time. Our success was particularly satisfying because it was based on genuine value creation rather than inherited wealth or social connections. Derek's continued innovation in diagnostic technology led to partnerships with automotive manufacturers who were interested in incorporating his insights into their own service training programs. He was invited to speak at industry conferences, consult with engineering teams, and contribute to technical publications that established him as a recognized expert in hybrid and electric vehicle systems. The respect and recognition he earned through merit stood in stark contrast to the inherited status that my family had always taken for granted. We expanded our business model to include training programs for other mechanics who wanted to develop expertise in emerging automotive technologies. These programs generated additional revenue while also creating a network of partners throughout the region who referred customers to us and collaborated on larger projects. Our reputation for integrity and excellence attracted high-quality employees and partners who shared our commitment to honest dealing and continuous improvement. The real estate market collapse that accompanied the broader economic recession provided us with an opportunity to purchase a larger facility for our main operations at a significantly reduced price. The building we acquired had previously housed a luxury car dealership that had gone out of business, and it provided us with the space and infrastructure needed to expand our manufacturing of diagnostic equipment while maintaining our service operations. Our third year in business marked the beginning of franchise opportunities as other entrepreneurs requested permission to replicate our mobile service model in their own markets. We developed comprehensive training programs, operational manuals, and support systems that allowed franchisees to benefit from our experience while maintaining the quality standards that had built our reputation. Each franchise agreement provided us with initial fees and ongoing royalties that created passive income streams. Industry recognition reached new levels when Derek received an innovation award from a major automotive trade association for his contributions to hybrid vehicle diagnostic technology. The award ceremony was attended by executives from major manufacturers, and Derek's acceptance speech was featured in industry publications that reached mechanics and business owners throughout the country. The recognition validated our approach of combining technical expertise with business innovation. Meanwhile, my parents' financial situation was deteriorating more rapidly than anyone in their social circle had anticipated. The investigation that followed several client complaints revealed that Williams and Associates had been engaging in increasingly desperate investment strategies to cover previous losses and maintain the appearance of continued success. My father had been borrowing against the firm's assets and personal guarantees to fund risky ventures that promised quick returns but carried enormous potential for catastrophic failure. The first public sign of serious trouble came when our family's country club membership was quietly suspended due to unpaid dues and fees. This was particularly devastating for my mother, who had built much of her identity around her status within the club's social hierarchy. The suspension was initially explained as a temporary administrative issue, but word quickly spread that the Williams family was experiencing financial difficulties. More serious problems emerged when several former clients filed lawsuits alleging that my father had misrepresented investment risks and failed to obtain proper authorization for certain transactions. The legal costs of defending these cases, combined with the continuing withdrawal of client funds, created a downward spiral that threatened the firm's survival. My father was forced to lay off several longtime employees and close the firm's satellite office to reduce operating expenses. During this period of my parents' declining fortunes, I received the first communication from my family in over 2 years. My mother called me on a Tuesday evening, her voice shaking with what sounded like a combination of desperation and humiliation. She began the conversation by asking about my health and well-being, as if nothing had happened between us, before gradually working up to the real purpose of her call. She explained that the family was going through a temporary financial difficulty that required them to be more careful about expenses and cash flow management. She wondered if Derek and I might be willing to provide a small loan to help them through this rough patch, emphasizing that it would be a short-term arrangement that would be repaid with interest as soon as their situation improved. The request was framed as an opportunity for me to demonstrate forgiveness and family loyalty while helping my parents preserve the dignity and status that had been so important to our family's identity. I listened to my mother's carefully rehearsed explanation without interrupting, remembering the $10 bill that my father had thrown in my face and the systematic campaign they had waged to destroy Derek's livelihood and freedom. When she finished speaking, I calmly reminded her of that moment and asked if she remembered telling me that I was worth nothing more than $10. I explained that Derek and I had built our success through hard work and integrity, and that we would not risk our financial security to enable the same reckless behavior that had created their current problems. My mother's reaction was immediate and revealing. She became angry and accusatory, claiming that I was being vindictive and ungrateful, that family obligations should override personal grudges, and that my success had only been possible because of the education and opportunities that they had provided during my childhood. She demanded to know how I could be so selfish and cruel toward the parents who had sacrificed so much to give me advantages in life. I ended the conversation by telling her that Derek and I had learned the difference between genuine family relationships and conditional approval based on compliance with other people's expectations. I suggested that they might benefit from learning those same lessons, and I wished them luck in finding solutions to their financial problems. The call ended with my mother screaming about my ingratitude and threatening to disinherit me completely, apparently forgetting that she had already done so 2 years earlier. The complete collapse of Williams and Associates came 18 months after my mother's desperate phone call, triggered by a major client's discovery that their portfolio had lost 80% of its value due to my father's unauthorized high-risk investments. The subsequent investigation revealed years of poor record-keeping, inappropriate financial strategies, and questionable business practices that violated numerous regulatory requirements and fiduciary responsibilities. The regulatory fines and legal settlements that followed bankrupted not only the investment firm but also my parents personally, since my father had pledged personal assets as collateral for various business loans and client guarantees. The family mansion, which had been in our family for 3 generations, was seized to pay creditors, along with the vacation house, luxury cars, jewelry, and artwork that had symbolized our family's wealth and status for decades. During this same period, our automotive business had grown into a regional enterprise worth over $5 million, with 12 locations, 60 employees, and franchise agreements that extended our brand throughout the northeastern United States. Derek's diagnostic technology had been licensed to 2 major automotive equipment manufacturers, generating substantial royalty payments that provided financial security independent of our service operations. Our success had attracted attention from national business publications, and we were featured in several articles about innovative small businesses that had thrived during difficult economic times by focusing on customer service and technological advancement. Derek and I were invited to speak at business conferences and entrepreneurship programs, sharing our story as an example of how determination and creativity could overcome initial disadvantages. The personal satisfaction of our achievements was enhanced by the knowledge that we had built everything through our own efforts, without relying on inherited wealth or family connections. Every dollar we earned represented genuine value creation, every employee we hired had been attracted by the quality of our work environment rather than family obligations, and every customer we served had chosen us based on merit rather than social status. The phone call that marked the final reversal of our family's fortunes came on a Thursday morning in March. My father's voice was barely recognizable, weakened by stress and what sounded like genuine humility for the first time in his life. He began by acknowledging that his previous treatment of me had been wrong, that he had allowed pride and social pressure to override his love for his daughter, and that he deeply regretted the pain he had caused. He explained that the bankruptcy proceedings had left him and my mother with virtually nothing, that they were living in a small apartment and surviving on Social Security payments, and that their former friends and associates had abandoned them as completely as they had once abandoned me. The irony was obvious to both of us. They were now experiencing the same rejection and isolation that they had imposed on me when I chose love over money. My father's request was heartbreaking in its desperation and humility. He wasn't asking for money or financial support, but rather for permission to have some kind of relationship with the daughter they had rejected. He wanted to know if there was any possibility of forgiveness, any chance that we could rebuild some form of family connection, any hope that Derek and I might be willing to acknowledge them as relatives despite everything that had happened. The conversation continued for over an hour, with my father providing details about their current circumstances that revealed just how completely their world had changed. The people they had considered close friends had disappeared as soon as the money was gone, proving that those relationships had been based on mutual advantage rather than genuine affection. The social institutions that had provided identity and purpose for my mother were now closed to them, leaving her isolated and depressed. My mother came on the phone during the later part of the conversation, and her transformation was even more dramatic than my father's. The confident, demanding woman who had controlled every aspect of our family's social life had been replaced by someone who sounded broken and uncertain. She apologized repeatedly for her previous behavior, acknowledging that she had been wrong about Derek, wrong about the importance of social status, and wrong about what really mattered in life. She asked about our business, expressing genuine admiration for what we had accomplished and curiosity about how we had developed our success. For the first time in my memory, she seemed interested in my thoughts and feelings as an individual rather than as a reflection of our family's reputation. The conversation revealed a vulnerability and humanity that I had never seen before, suggesting that losing everything had forced her to discover values and priorities that had been buried beneath years of superficial concerns. I told my parents that I would need time to think about their request and discuss it with Derek before making any decisions about future contact. I explained that while I appreciated their apologies, rebuilding trust would require consistent behavior over time rather than just words during a crisis. I made it clear that any future relationship would need to be based on mutual respect and acceptance, including full recognition of Derek as my husband and business partner. The conversation ended with my promise to consider their request carefully and contact them within a few weeks with my decision. After hanging up, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: satisfaction at seeing justice served, sadness about the destruction of my family, and uncertainty about whether forgiveness was possible or advisable given the depth of their previous betrayal. Derek and I spent considerable time discussing this unexpected development and its implications for our future. He reminded me that forgiveness was primarily for my own benefit rather than theirs, that holding on to anger and resentment would ultimately harm me more than them. At the same time, he emphasized the importance of protecting ourselves from people who had proven capable of extreme cruelty and manipulation when their interests were threatened. After 2 weeks of careful consideration and extensive discussions with Derek, I decided to offer my parents a limited form of reconciliation that would allow us to rebuild our relationship gradually while maintaining appropriate boundaries to protect our family and business interests. This decision was based not on forgiveness of their past behavior, but on recognition that everyone deserves opportunities for redemption and growth when they demonstrate genuine remorse and commitment to change. I called my father and explained that Derek and I were willing to provide basic financial support for their living expenses, including rent for their apartment and coverage of essential needs like food and medical care. However, this assistance would not extend to restoring their previous lifestyle or helping them re-establish their business activities. I made it clear that this support was conditional on their continued respectful behavior and acceptance of the boundaries we established for our relationship. More importantly, I explained that any future contact would require full acknowledgement of Derek as my husband and equal partner in both our marriage and our business. They would need to treat him with the same respect and consideration they would show to any other family member, and they would not be permitted to make comments or suggestions that undermined our relationship or questioned our life choices. This condition was non-negotiable and would result in immediate termination of contact if violated. Derek's reaction to these conditions revealed the depth of his character and the strength of our partnership. Despite everything my parents had done to him, including the false imprisonment and destruction of his original business, he supported my decision to help them and agreed to participate in carefully structured family interactions. His willingness to forgive demonstrated a generosity of spirit that contrasted sharply with the vindictive behavior my parents had previously displayed. The first family dinner in over 3 years took place at a neutral restaurant, with all parties feeling nervous and uncertain about how to navigate this unprecedented situation. My parents appeared genuinely humbled by their circumstances, and they made obvious efforts to treat Derek with respect and interest. They asked about our business operations, complimented Derek's technical expertise, and acknowledged the impressive achievements we had accomplished through our own efforts. My mother's behavior was particularly remarkable because it represented such a complete reversal from her previous attitudes. She seemed genuinely curious about the practical aspects of running a business, asked thoughtful questions about our employees and customers, and expressed admiration for the innovative approaches we had developed. The transformation suggested that losing her privileged position had forced her to develop appreciation for qualities like hard work and integrity that she had previously dismissed as irrelevant. Over the following months, we established a pattern of regular but limited contact that allowed us to rebuild family relationships while maintaining our independence and protecting our business interests. My parents visited our home occasionally, attended company celebrations, and developed genuine friendships with some of our employees. They seemed to enjoy being part of a community that valued contribution and character rather than inherited status. Our business continued expanding during this period, with Derek's technological innovations leading to consulting contracts with major automotive manufacturers and our franchise network growing to include locations in 12 states. We had created something that neither of us could have achieved alone, a company that combined technical excellence with business innovation while maintaining the values of integrity and customer service that had guided us from the beginning. The personal growth that resulted from our journey was perhaps more valuable than our financial success. I had discovered capabilities and strengths that would have remained dormant if I had followed the path my parents originally planned for me. The challenges we faced together had strengthened our marriage and deepened our appreciation for genuine partnership based on mutual respect and shared goals rather than superficial compatibility or social convenience. Derek's transformation from small-town mechanic to recognized industry innovator demonstrated the potential that exists when talent is combined with opportunity and support. His success was particularly meaningful because it was based entirely on merit and contribution rather than inherited advantage or social connections. The recognition he received from industry peers validated our belief that excellence and integrity would ultimately be rewarded regardless of background or circumstances. My parents' journey from wealth and privilege to humility and dependence had taught them lessons that decades of success had failed to provide. They discovered that genuine relationships require mutual caring and respect, that personal worth cannot be measured in financial terms, and that happiness depends more on character and connections than on status and possessions. While their education had been expensive and painful, it had ultimately made them more authentic and compassionate people. The $10 bill that my father had thrown in my face 5 years earlier now occupies a place of honor in my office, framed as a reminder of how far we have traveled and how much we have learned. It represents the moment when I was forced to choose between comfort and authenticity, between inherited privilege and earned achievement, between conditional approval and unconditional love. The choice was difficult and costly, but it led to a life that is infinitely more satisfying than anything my parents originally planned for me. Our story demonstrates that true success cannot be inherited or purchased, but must be created through dedication, innovation, and commitment to values that transcend material considerations. The wealth and status that my parents prized so highly proved to be fragile and temporary, while the skills, relationships, and character that Derek and I developed together have provided a foundation for lasting achievement and genuine happiness. As I reflect on this incredible journey, I realize that losing everything was actually the beginning of finding what really mattered. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as the worst disasters, and sometimes being rejected by the people you love creates space for discovering who you really are and what you're truly capable of becoming. The pain and struggle were real, but they led to a life that is more authentic, more meaningful, and more fulfilling than anything I could have imagined when I was simply Richard and Catherine Williams' obedient daughter. Derek and I continue building our business and our family, guided by the lessons we learned during our darkest moments and inspired by the knowledge that genuine success is measured not by what you inherit, but by what you create, not by who you know, but by who you become, and not by what others think of you, but by what you think of yourself when you look in the mirror each morning. What would you have done if your parents threw money at you and kicked you out for following your heart? Have you ever had to choose between family approval and personal happiness? Share your thoughts in the comments below because I'd love to hear your perspective on family, forgiveness, and finding your own path in life. If this story inspired you or made you think about your own relationships differently, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more stories about overcoming adversity and building success from nothing. Don't forget to hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest videos. And share this story with anyone who might need to hear that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you can actually be the best thing that ever happened to you. Thank you so much for watching, and remember that your worth is never determined by other people's opinions, but by your own courage to live authentically and love genuinely.